The applause in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in New York City was deafening. Underneath the dazzling crystal chandeliers, everything shimmered, creating a dreamlike ambience. Standing beside my husband, Sterling Vance, co-founder of the software company Nexus Solutions, I accepted the flood of congratulations with a practiced smile. But before I get too far into the story, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from here in the US. It helps us see just how far and wide our story can travel. Today marked the 5th anniversary of Nexus Solutions' founding, a significant milestone. It was also the day we officially announced that the company had finally reached a valuation of $1 billion. This achievement was the culmination of the blood, sweat, tears, and frankly, our youth, that Sterling and I had poured into our marriage and our shared dream. I was wearing a jade green silk dress, my hair styled in an elegant updo, complemented by subtle yet striking makeup. A feeling of immense pride swelled in my chest, almost too profound for words. I couldn't help but think back to the day I decided to abandon a promising career in Boston and return home. All my friends thought I was out of my mind, but I just smiled. Here was Sterling, the man I had loved since our college days, the man with whom I believed I would spend the rest of my life. Together, we had written the first line of code, stayed up countless nights to finish crucial projects, and shared the little money we had, always supporting each other's ambitions. Nexus Solutions was more than just a business. It was our spiritual child, a living testament to our unwavering love and our countless sacrifices. Sterling, in his impeccable custom-tailored suit, looked absolutely incredible. He confidently ascended the stage. His voice, always warm and self-assured, resonated throughout the ballroom. He spoke eloquently about our journey, recounting the countless difficulties and challenges we had overcome together. He expressed sincere gratitude to the partners and employees who had been with us every step of the way. I watched him from below in respectful silence, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride. If he was the technical genius behind Nexus Solutions, I was the one who managed external relations and meticulously devised our overall development strategy. We were like two perfectly complementary puzzle pieces, working together seamlessly to build the solid castle that was Nexus Solutions. But then, at that very moment, Sterling's voice suddenly cracked, a strange, unfamiliar emotion creeping into his tone. Looking off at some distant point, he began to speak again. And today, he said, I want to give the most special thanks to one person, my life partner, who has always been an inexhaustible source of inspiration for me and the driving force that allowed me to overcome every storm. That person, silently by my side, gave me the power to turn the most outlandish ideas into reality. The entire room seemed to collectively hold its breath. Without even realizing it, a happy smile spread across my face. I naturally assumed he was speaking about me. Hadn't I been that person for him throughout all these years? I instinctively began to prepare myself to go up on the stage and share that moment of well-deserved glory with him. But then I realized Sterling wasn't looking at me at all. His gaze was fixed on a corner of the stage. Sierra, would you come over here, please? It was a tender voice, one I had genuinely never heard him use before. A young woman tentatively appeared from behind the stage. It was Sierra Rhodes, a relatively new employee who had joined the marketing team just over a year ago. She was wearing a flowing white maternity dress, loose-fitting but unable to completely conceal her visibly swollen belly. There was an undeniable shyness on her face, but in her eyes, there shone an unconcealed pride. As she carefully approached Sterling, my husband instinctively reached out to help her, a gesture that seemed so astonishingly natural, so tender and intimate. He then handed her a bouquet of red roses, my favorite flowers. Time seemed to grind to a complete halt. The soft music that had been playing unobtrusively in the background suddenly sounded discordant, and a low murmur began to spread throughout the ballroom. At first, it was just barely audible whispering, but soon it grew into an uncontrollable buzz, like a swarm of angry wasps. Hundreds of sets of eyes locked on me, filled with looks of curiosity, pity, and, above all, an overwhelming sense of compassion. Those gazes hurt far more than 1,000 carefully crafted insults ever could. I felt my cheeks burning with shame, my throat becoming increasingly dry, and the smile that had been plastered on my lips suddenly freeze into place. There I was, the center of all the attention, transformed not into the protagonist of my own glorious celebration, but into the subject of the most miserable spectacle imaginable. Sterling didn't need to say another word. His tender gesture, Sierra's pregnant belly, everything was a clear and unmistakable declaration. Before everyone we knew, he had proclaimed their relationship, his betrayal and my public humiliation. At the precise moment our spiritual child, Nexus Solutions, was spreading its wings, ready to fly, the family I had poured my heart and soul into building shattered right before my very eyes. The first feeling that washed over me wasn't pain, but an overwhelming emptiness that seemed to chill my body to the bone. All the sounds around me began to fade into a dull roar, and I could only clearly see the image of Sterling and Sierra standing together under the bright stage lights. They actually made a beautiful couple. The successful entrepreneur and the beautiful young woman carrying his child. And I, the wife who had spent the most difficult and demanding years by his side, had in an instant become an old, annoying obstacle, a mere shadow from his past. The murmurs grew louder and more intrusive. Poor Alexandra, how awful! Who would have ever thought? So, that's what's been going on. Isolated phrases reached my ears, stabbing at my pride like a series of carefully aimed daggers. At the head table, Sterling's mother, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, looked at me with a barely concealed mixture of satisfaction and disdain. She had never liked me, not even a little bit. She had always complained that I was too strong and that I dominated her precious son. At that particular moment, she must have been immensely satisfied with how everything was playing out. I took a deep breath and straightened my back. I absolutely couldn't break down, at least not here, not now. I was Alexandra Hayes, the daughter of the formidable Isabella Hayes, a woman who had never learned to bow her head to any adversity, no matter how daunting. I tightly gripped the clutch bag I was carrying. The physical pain of my nails digging sharply into my palm helped me regain my composure, grounding me in the present moment. I stared intensely at the stage, directly at Sterling, who was pointedly trying to avoid my gaze. And then I did something that absolutely no one expected. I walked slowly and deliberately toward the stage. My steps were firm and purposeful, without even a hint of hesitation. A strange, almost eerie silence descended upon the entire ballroom as the silk of my dress whispered against the floor. Everyone held their breath, watching intently to see what I would do. Sterling and Sierra were visibly disconcerted by my actions. My mother-in-law frowned, her expression cautious and wary. I confidently climbed onto the platform and positioned myself right next to Sterling. Then, I calmly took the microphone from the stunned presenter's hand, turned to face the assembled guests, and managed to produce a serene smile. A smile I never would have imagined I could muster at such a devastating moment. "Good evening, distinguished guests," I said. My voice sounded surprisingly clear and calm, even to my own ears. "I am Alexandra Hayes, wife of Sterling Vance, co-founder and majority shareholder of Nexus Solutions." I paused, slowly surveying the room. I could clearly see the astonishment reflected in their eyes. "I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to all our partners and esteemed guests who have joined us today to celebrate our collective success. The triumph of Nexus Solutions has been made possible thanks to the unwavering trust and continued support of all of you." I turned to Sterling, who was now pale and visibly rigid. "I also want to thank my husband for his moving and heartfelt speech. He has always been a remarkably talented and passionate man." Then my gaze shifted to the investors, especially those from Phoenix Capital Group, led by my mother, Isabella Hayes. My voice became noticeably firmer. "However, in light of recent events, as the majority shareholder and head of the company's overall development strategy, I believe that the time has come to seriously reevaluate the management ethics of our executive leadership." A heavy silence settled over the room, crushing the celebratory atmosphere. Then I continued, carefully emphasizing each and every word. "Therefore, I will officially request my mother, the CEO of Phoenix Capital Group, Mrs. Isabella Hayes, to provisionally suspend all additional investment plans in Nexus Solutions. We need ample time to conduct a complete and thorough reevaluation because if a company truly desires sustainable growth, a strong moral foundation must be the paramount value considered. Finishing my unexpected speech, I calmly set the microphone down in silence. I gave one last, graceful bow to the stunned guests and descended the stage with my head held high. I could feel Sterling's stunned gaze boring into my back, my mother-in-law's face contorted with barely suppressed fury, and Sierra's utterly lost expression, as she clearly didn't understand what was happening. Their glorious celebration had been utterly and completely shattered. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, and I didn't make a dramatic scene. I simply used my position and my influence to return the humiliation they had so casually inflicted upon me. That was the way a woman who refuses to allow anyone to trample on her dignity fights back. I left the hotel without looking back, not even once. I didn't want to see the chaos I was leaving in my wake. I only wanted to escape that suffocating space as quickly as possible. The curious glances, the whispered comments, the stifled gasps. I drove myself, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white with tension. The tears I had managed to hold back all night finally welled up, tracing hot, stinging paths down my cheeks. But they weren't tears of weakness or surrender. They were tears of injustice and profound pain. I didn't go to the house I had shared with Sterling. That place had suddenly become a strange and alien space, tainted by betrayal. I drove directly to my mother's home, the only place in the entire world where, no matter how broken or utterly defeated I was, I knew I would always be welcome, without question or reservation. My mother's mansion stood nestled in a quiet, secluded garden far away from the incessant noise and chaos of the city. As soon as he spotted my car approaching, the butler rushed out to open the door for me. My mother, CO Isabella Hayes, seemed to be waiting for me, standing just inside the doorway. Despite her petite figure, she radiated an imposing dignity and strength. Without asking any questions, she simply embraced me. "You are home now. That is what matters most, my daughter," she said in a warm, comforting voice, gently patting my back. One single hug, a simple phrase of reassurance from my mother, and all my carefully constructed defenses crumbled into dust. I cried like a small child, releasing all the pent-up pain and bitterness I had been desperately trying to repress. My mother allowed me to cry for as long as I needed, gently stroking my hair in a soothing, rhythmic motion. She knew I needed that moment of catharsis. When I finally calmed down, she led me to the living room and served me a steaming cup of hot chamomile tea. "You handled it remarkably well," my mother said, her gaze a blend of deep affection and quiet pride. "They told me everything. The way you conducted yourself on stage was truly admirable. You absolutely didn't let them humiliate you." "But Mom, it hurts so much. I honestly don't understand why he did this to me. 10 years together, 5 years building a company from the ground up. All of that is apparently worth less than a woman he's barely known for a year." My mother sighed and took my hand in hers. "Daughter, when a man's heart changes, he can become incredibly cruel. It's not your fault, Alexandra. You did everything you could as a wife. You simply put your trust in the wrong person. But don't worry. Mom is here for you now. Even if the sky falls, together we will get through this, I promise you." My mother's unwavering resolve was like a soothing balm that slowly began to calm my agitated heart. We sat in comfortable silence, but I felt a deep and unbreakable connection between us. My mother was more than just a mother to me. She was my closest friend, my most trusted mentor, and the most solid pillar in my entire life. Just then, the doorbell rang, shattering the quiet intimacy of the moment. It was Daniel, my extremely loyal assistant. He had been with me since the earliest days of the company and was the person I trusted implicitly. His face was etched with worry. "Miss Hayes, you weren't answering your phone, so I came straight here," he said urgently. "I apologize for the intrusion, but there is something extremely important I need to inform you of immediately." "What is it, Daniel?" I asked, suddenly invaded by a sense of foreboding. Daniel opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of papers. "Ma'am, lately there have been several strange movements in the company's cash flow. Several large payments have been made to a company called Apex Management LLC. I investigated, and it turns out this company was founded only a few months ago, and its director is none other than Mr. Vance's mother's cousin." My mother and I exchanged a horrified glance. Daniel continued in a worried voice. "It seems they are creating phantom contracts in order to divert funds from Nexus Solutions. The amounts are not small, ma'am. And I also discovered that Mr. Vance met several times with his personal lawyer last month." Every word that came out of Daniel's mouth was like a hammer blow to my head. This betrayal was far more cruel and calculated than I could have ever imagined. Sterling was not only being unfaithful, but he and his mother were actively conspiring to seize control of the entire company and leave me empty-handed, out on the street. That night's celebratory spectacle was not just a carefully staged event to present his mistress to the world. It was the starting signal for a meticulously planned scheme. When Daniel finished speaking, a profound silence settled over the room, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the antique wall clock. My mother seemed momentarily shocked, but she quickly regained the composure of an experienced businesswoman. She took the papers from Daniel's hand, put on her reading glasses, and began to examine them page by page with a critical eye. "Sterling and that woman," my mother said in an icy voice, grinding her teeth together in anger. "They have crossed a line they absolutely shouldn't have." I sat there feeling as if I were falling into a bottomless abyss. Before the gaping wound of emotional betrayal could even begin to heal, it was overlaid by the agonizing pain of having been cheated out of the business to which I had dedicated all my passion and energy. I had naively thought that Sterling had simply changed his heart, that he was temporarily blinded by novelty and lust. But no, this was a coldly calculated conspiracy, designed to take absolutely everything from me. Not just my husband and my home, but also my hard work, my intelligence, and my hard-earned honor. Daniel continued reporting on what he had secretly investigated. The company Apex Management LLC was nothing more than a shell company with no real commercial activity. The consulting contracts Nexus Solutions had signed with it were all rigged, and the clauses were deliberately ambiguous to make them difficult to challenge. In just the last 3 months, the transferred amount already amounted to tens of millions of dollars. And that's not all, ma'am. Daniel hesitated before taking another paper from his briefcase. "This is a draft of the divorce agreement that I accidentally saw on Mr. Vance's lawyer's office computer. When I went to pick up some documents, I took a picture of it with my phone. With trembling hands, I took the paper from him. It was a unilateral divorce agreement, meticulously designed to leave me with nothing. In it, Sterling blamed me for everything that had gone wrong in our marriage. It claimed that I had focused solely on the business, completely neglecting our home and failing to fulfill my duties as a wife. But the cruelest part of the agreement was related to the division of assets. According to the document, all shares of Nexus Solutions would belong solely to him, arguing that he was the principal founder and the sole contributor of the key technology that made the company successful. Furthermore, I would have to assume all of the company's debts, including the phantom debts they had created through their dubious consulting firm. If I signed that document, I would not only be financially ruined, but I would also end up with massive debt. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. So, 10 years of marriage were finally valued at a piece of paper full of betrayal and malice. In the eyes of Sterling and his mother, I had been nothing more than a tool, a stepping stone to help them reach the pinnacle of glory. And once that goal was achieved, they were ready to discard me without the slightest hesitation or remorse. They are even trying to erase any trace of your contribution to the company's technological base," Daniel added, his voice filled with indignation. "They have hired another team of programmers to rewrite some important modules so they can claim that the underlying idea belonged solely to Mr. Vance from the beginning." Hearing that, I could no longer cry. The pain transformed into a silent flame of anger that burned fiercely in my chest. That technological base was the work of my life. The original idea of a flexible and intelligent business management system was mine. It was born from my experiences working in Boston. Sterling was only the one who had technically implemented it, and now he was planning to steal all the credit for my ingenuity and hard work. My mother struck the stack of incriminating documents on the table with the palm of her hand. "Enough," she said firmly. "We absolutely cannot stand idly by while they do this to you, Alexandra. You have to get up and fight, not to cling to a worthless man, but to defend your honor and what rightfully belongs to you. And know that I will be by your side every step of the way." My mother's determined gaze instilled immense strength in me. Yes, I couldn't collapse. I had to fight for myself, for the years of my youth I had sacrificed, and to make those traitors pay dearly for their despicable actions. This battle would not be easy, but I knew I wasn't alone. I had my mother, Daniel, and, most importantly, the truth was unequivocally on my side. The very next morning, we didn't waste a single minute. My mother called an old family friend, the lawyer Eleanor Jensen. She wasn't one of those media-friendly lawyers who constantly appear in the press, but in the legal world, she was widely respected for her unshakable integrity and her vast experience in complex economic litigation. Her office, far from the ostentation of the large, well-known firms, was located on a quiet, discreet street on the Upper East Side. Eleanor Jensen was a woman in her 60s, with gray hair pulled back in an impeccable bun and an intelligent, perceptive gaze behind her thick glasses. She greeted us warmly and offered us chamomile tea. While I explained everything from the dramatic events of the celebration to the damning evidence Daniel had gathered, she listened in thoughtful silence, nodding occasionally. When I finally finished, she spoke in a soft but surprisingly powerful voice. "Alexandra, I am truly sorry for what you have had to endure, but amidst all the bad news there is also some good news. Their haste and audacity at the party were a fatal mistake. Thanks to that, we have gained some valuable time to prepare our legal strategy." She carefully took the photo of the divorce agreement Daniel had obtained and read every clause meticulously. "A greedy and foolish agreement," she declared. "They seriously underestimated you and your mother. They thought that, with the psychological pressure of the mistress and the pregnancy, you would simply collapse and sign absolutely anything they put in front of you. But they were wrong. Eleanor, I am entrusting this entire case to you," my mother said firmly. "I cannot allow them to do this to my daughter." The lawyer nodded in agreement. "Don't worry, Isabella. This is not a simple divorce case. It is an asset dispute with clear indications of fraud and embezzlement. We will not be dragged into the emotional battle of adultery and infidelity. We will only use that matter as evidence of the irreparable breakdown of the marriage and Sterling's overall dishonesty. Our main focus will be elsewhere." She looked at me intently with her sharp, insightful eyes. "Alexandra, from now on, we must outline a clear and effective legal strategy. First, we will focus on demonstrating that your contribution to the founding and development of Nexus Solutions was not just financial but, more importantly, constituted intellectual property, specifically the core idea and the underlying technology." She continued explaining, "We must gather all the evidence we can find, no matter how small it may seem. Emails exchanging initial ideas, sketches, notes in old notebooks, and testimonies from former colleagues who witnessed your hard work from the very beginning. All of that will be our weapons in this fight. Second," she held up 2 fingers for emphasis, "we will attack their embezzlement of funds. The fact that Daniel discovered that shell company is a major advantage for us. Now we have to dig even deeper, meticulously tracking the money flow. This will prove that Sterling and his mother acted opaquely and deliberately harmed the other shareholders, including you." Listening to Attorney Jensen's clear and strategic analysis, my confused and chaotic mind began to clear. I no longer felt completely lost or utterly alone. I knew I had found the right person to trust with my future. "Agreed, attorney," I said. My voice sounded much firmer and more confident than it had in days. "I will do exactly as you say. I will look for all my old files and documents, no matter how long it takes." "Good," the lawyer replied, smiling kindly. "Remember that the law is ultimately on the side of justice. This fight may be long and exhausting, but if we are persistent and gather sufficient evidence, justice will ultimately prevail. Turn your pain into strength, Alexandra, and you will get through this." The meeting with Eleanor Jensen gave me a surge of new energy and resolve. I was no longer the tragic heroine of my own personal drama. I was going to be a warrior, fighting fiercely to recover what was rightfully mine. The first step was to face the past and return to that place that was once my home, in order to find the necessary pieces for the war ahead. 2 days after the meeting with Attorney Jensen, I finally decided to return to the house I had once called home with Sterling. My heart was heavy, filled with a confusing mix of conflicting emotions. This place held so many memories of 10 years of love, laughter, and married life. Every corner, every piece of furniture, I had personally chosen and carefully placed. I had honestly thought I would live here for the rest of my life, that I would grow old with Sterling in our small, cozy garden. But now, every step I took in this house felt incredibly painful and bitter, like walking barefoot on broken glass. I deliberately chose a time in the middle of the day, when I knew Sterling would definitely be at the office. I desperately didn't want to run into him. I just wanted to quietly collect my things and leave as quickly as possible. I went directly to the office we had shared, where I kept all my most important documents. The room was still tidy and organized, but the air felt strangely cold and sterile. The photo of our wedding, prominently displayed on the desk, suddenly felt like a cruel and mocking reminder of what I had lost. I immediately started searching. I rummaged through old files, opened dusty boxes stored at the top of the cabinets, and finally found what I was looking for. An old, brown leather-bound notebook stored in a wooden box. It was the very notebook I had used when I was still working in Boston, where I had jotted down all my spontaneous ideas, the first rough sketches of an innovative enterprise management software system. The pages were yellowed with age, and my handwriting had faded in some places, but the diagrams of the system architecture, the detailed notes on the key algorithms, remained remarkably clear. This was the very soul of Nexus Solutions, the undeniable proof of my indispensable contribution. With the notebook safely in my hands, I felt some of the strength I had lost begin to return. I carefully put the notebook, along with several USB drives containing related material, into my bag. Just as I was about to leave, the door burst open. Sterling was standing there, visibly paralyzed when he saw me. He clearly hadn't expected my return. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "I came to pick up my things," I replied calmly, trying my best not to show any emotion. Sterling's gaze immediately fell on the bag I was carrying, and a shadow of unease flickered across his eyes. He quickly entered the room and closed the door forcefully behind him. "Alexandra, we need to talk. Please don't complicate things any further than they already are. What happened at the party was a mistake, but you shouldn't have acted that way either. Do you even realize the damage you've done to the company?" I let out a harsh laugh, a cold, bitter sound. "I damaged the company? And were you thinking about the company when you plotted with your mother to divert its funds? Were you even thinking about our years together, about my hard work and dedication, when you prepared a divorce agreement designed to leave me financially ruined and burdened with crippling debt?" Sterling's face visibly changed. He hadn't imagined that I knew about any of that. "What nonsense are you talking about? Who told you all this?" "It doesn't matter who told me," I said. "The important thing is that it's all true, Sterling. Stop pretending. I'm far too tired for games." I looked him directly in the eyes, those eyes I had once loved so much. Now I could only see lies and cold calculations staring back at me. "I loved you, Sterling, and I trusted you unconditionally. I gave up everything to come back here and build a business with you. And how have you repaid me for my unwavering loyalty? With betrayal and a cruel, heartless conspiracy." Sterling, clearly disconcerted by my unexpected knowledge, stepped closer to me and tried to take my hand. "Alexandra, just listen to me for a moment. It's not at all what you think it is. Sierra was a mistake. I still love you. We can start over. Take back the request you made to the investment group. Let's not throw away everything we've worked for." I slapped his hand away, taking a step backward. His words had become repulsive to me. "Start over, Sterling? Do you think I'm some kind of idiot? Is your love really that meaningless? And what about the child that woman is carrying? What's your plan for him? Or is everything just a mistake you can conveniently brush aside the moment things don't go your way? I didn't come here today to listen to your pathetic excuses or to beg, I stated firmly. I've come to reclaim what's rightfully mine and to make sure you know that I will never sign some unjust divorce agreement. I'm prepared to fight to the bitter end to defend my reputation and all the work I did at Nexus Solutions. Since you and your mother started this whole mess, you'd better be ready to face the consequences. After delivering that, I didn't give him the chance to say another word. I simply turned around, opened the door, and walked out. I could hear Sterling shouting my name after me, but I didn't stop. That confrontation completely severed any remaining feelings I had for him. There was no love, no hope, nothing. There was only one path forward, the pursuit of justice. Leaving that house, I felt as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The confrontation with Sterling had been incredibly painful, but it was something I had to do. It enabled me to fully break free from the past and turn my attention toward the future. There wasn't any more time to waste feeling sorry for myself. The evidence I had managed to find was a decent starting point, but as Attorney Jensen had pointed out, the battle was going to be a long and difficult one. In the days that followed, Daniel and I worked tirelessly. We systematically organized all the information and started trying to locate more people who could verify my involvement in the early days of Nexus Solutions. However, it quickly became clear to me that solely focusing on recovering what I had lost at Nexus Solutions was a rather passive approach. Sterling and his mother still held the reins, and they could undermine me in countless ways. I needed to establish something independent of them, a solid foundation I could rely on regardless of how the lawsuit turned out. The idea of starting a new company began to take shape in my mind, not out of a desire for revenge, and not necessarily to compete directly with Nexus Solutions, but as a way to prove my own capabilities. I wanted to prove to everyone that even without Sterling, even without Nexus Solutions, Alexandra Hayes was still capable of creating an exceptional, even superior technology product. I was confident that I could rebuild a far better and more advanced version of the technological foundation I had built for Nexus Solutions. I shared my idea with my mother. After considering it for a moment, she gave me her full support. That's the spirit, honey. That's how someone with real grit acts. Instead of fighting to reclaim some old house, you're going to build a brand new castle of your own. You just focus on the work. I'll take care of the money. My mother's support was a source of incredible strength for me, but I knew that ideas and capital alone weren't enough. I needed a team, technical talent. And then I thought of Andrew. Andrew had been a college friend of both Sterling and me. The three of us used to hang out together all the time. Andrew was kind, intelligent, and a dedicated student. But unlike the outgoing and sociable Sterling, he was quite reserved. I knew he had a crush on me, but he never actually said anything. He simply cared for me from a distance. After graduation, Sterling and I started dating, and Andrew ended up going abroad to study and work. A few years ago, I had heard that he had come back and had become a prominent venture capitalist in the tech world. I hesitated for a moment, but I decided to give Andrew a call. It felt a little awkward reaching out after so much time, but the warm, familiar sound of his voice immediately put me at ease. Alexandra, it's been so long. How are you doing? I'm fine. Andrew, am I catching you at a bad time? Bothering me? Not at all. I'm really glad you called. But is everything all right? You don't sound quite like yourself. Andrew's attentiveness really touched me. I gathered my courage and explained my situation and my plans to launch a new company. I didn't embellish the pain or complain. I presented everything as calmly as I could, as if it were just a business plan. Andrew listened silently until I was done. I was expecting words of comfort or, at worst, pity, but what he said completely caught me off guard. I've been waiting for this day, Alexandra. The day you stepped out of the shadow of Nexus Solutions and shone on your own. His voice was full of sincerity. Your talent is far too great for what you were doing there. I truly mean that, Alexandra. Andrew continued, I've always followed the progress of Nexus Solutions. I knew the core of it started with your idea. Sterling is an excellent programmer, but you're the one with the strategic vision. Deciding to go out on your own will be the best thing you ever do. Just tell me what you need. I'll support you not just as a friend, but also as an investor. I believe in you, Alexandra." Andrew's words were like a cool, refreshing drink of water, quenching my parched spirit. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, a man valued me for my talent and my actual worth, not as some betrayed wife. The call with Andrew further strengthened my resolve. I knew I had found my first ally in the challenging journey ahead. After talking to Andrew, things moved forward quickly. Andrew wasn't just a talker, he got right to work. He immediately set up a meeting and introduced me to a team of brilliant young engineers from a top-tier technical university like MIT. They were young, bright, full of passion, and eager to participate in a project with a bold vision. When I shared my idea for a next-generation enterprise management platform, smarter, more flexible, and utilizing the latest technologies like artificial intelligence, their eyes lit up. They were captivated by my vision and impressed by the poise and confidence of a woman who had overcome adversity. After several meetings, we really clicked. Synergitech was born. It was a name that embodied all my hopes and my determination. The synergy of a new generation of technology. We rented a small office, nothing fancy, but well-equipped and full of natural light. The young engineers and I worked together day and night. The atmosphere at Synergitech was completely different from the last few years at Nexus Solutions. There were no internal conflicts or backstabbing. There was only a shared passion for technology and a spirit of teamwork. It felt like I was back at the very beginning of my career. Only this time I had far more control over my own destiny and I was far stronger. In the midst of all this progress, an unexpected visitor came to see me. Sierra. She called and asked if we could meet at a quiet cafe. She seemed far more worn down than when she had made that dramatic entrance at the party. Her pregnant belly was larger, and she moved more slowly. She had lost her previous air of arrogance and defiance. All that remained was a sorrowful expression, her eyes filled with tears. "Alexandra," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I have no right to even talk to you. I know I've done wrong, but please, I'm begging you. Can't you just leave Sterling alone?" I stirred my coffee in silence, waiting to see what kind of performance she was about to put on. Sierra broke down, sobbing. "Sterling is really struggling. Ever since you announced that you were withdrawing the investment, the company has been in crisis, and the other partners are looking at us with suspicion. His mother is constantly putting pressure on him. He's lost weight. I know you're angry, but you were together for 10 years. Taking things to this extreme is pushing him over the edge." She rubbed her belly and added, "And then there's my son. This child doesn't deserve any of this. I just want my son to be born into a complete family, with his father. Please, I'm begging you, drop the lawsuit and don't make things any worse. We'll give you whatever money you want. I'll talk to Sterling, please just let it go." Hearing that, I couldn't help but smirk. Who did she think I was? A woman whose silence could be bought with money? She and Sterling had publicly humiliated me and conspired to take everything away from me. And now she was trying to lecture me about justice and the well-being of an innocent child? I set down my coffee cup and looked directly into her eyes. "Are you finished?" My voice was so calm that even I was surprised. Sierra seemed taken aback by my reaction. "First," I said, emphasizing each word, "the issue between Sterling and me is no longer some emotional love triangle. It's a matter of illegal business practices. He and his mother attempted fraud and embezzlement. Those are crimes, and crimes must be punished. They have nothing to do with you or your son. Second, don't try to use your child as a shield. If you had actually thought about him, you wouldn't have interfered with someone else's marriage in the first place, and you wouldn't have been involved in their wrongdoing. The child isn't to blame, but adults have to take responsibility for their actions. And finally, I stood up from my chair. Go tell Sterling that I don't need his money. What I need is justice, and I won't back down. If you really want your son to have a father, then advise him to face the truth and accept his responsibility before the law. That would be the best thing for your child." Without waiting for her to reply, I turned and walked away. I knew that behind me, her sorrowful expression had turned to one of anger, but I didn't care. On the path I had chosen, There was no room for weakness or for misplaced compassion. The real battle had only just begun. A few weeks after my encounter with Sierra, just as Attorney Jensen had predicted, Sterling launched a counterattack, but he didn't try to talk or negotiate. Instead, he resorted to a far more base and petty tactic. One morning, I received a court summons. Sterling, acting as the president of Nexus Solutions, was suing me, accusing me of violating trade secrets and stealing intellectual property. The multi-page lawsuit stated, in no uncertain terms, that after leaving the company, I had used key technological secrets belonging to Nexus Solutions to start Synergitech, thereby causing serious harm to the company. They demanded that Synergitech immediately cease operations and that I pay them an exorbitant amount in damages. It was a blatant attempt to shift the burden of proof, to tarnish my reputation, and to crush my new company before it even had a chance to get off the ground. When the young engineers at Synergitech heard the news, they were understandably worried. They feared for the future of the company and for being dragged into a lengthy and expensive legal battle. I understood their concerns, but instead of showing any sign of hesitation, I called a meeting with the entire staff. Don't worry, I told everyone firmly. This is nothing more than a dirty trick on their part. The technological foundation that we're building at Synergitech is completely new, based on far more advanced ideas and architecture than anything at Nexus Solutions. Truth and justice are on our side. What we need to do now is to stay focused on our work and develop the best product possible. I'll take care of all the legal stuff. My composure reassured them. Immediately after the meeting, I went to Attorney Jensen's office with the lawsuit. Contrary to my worries, she glanced over the documents and smiled. He's digging his own grave, she said. This is the opportunity we've been waiting for. We should have sued them, but they've created the perfect legal scenario for us to present all our evidence. That Sterling, spoiled by his mother, is a complete idiot. Under Attorney Jensen's guidance, we quickly prepared our response to the lawsuit. We not only refuted Sterling's baseless accusations, but we also presented clear evidence proving that I was the original creator of the technology. The old notebook that I had found turned out to be our most important piece of evidence. We photocopied and notarized every single page, every architecture diagram, and presented it to the court. The timeline was clearly established compared to when Nexus Solutions was founded. We also had emails from over 5 years ago, back when Sterling and I were exchanging our initial ideas. In them, it was clear that I was proposing and developing the main concepts. Furthermore, Attorney Jensen contacted 2 engineers who had left Nexus Solutions. They had been there from the beginning, had seen me spending countless nights fixing bugs, and had heard me explaining my vision for the product. At first, they were a little hesitant, but my sincerity and the lawyer's legal assurances convinced them to testify. The first reconciliation hearing took place in a very tense atmosphere. Sterling and his lawyer, acting arrogant, presented documents that were supposed to demonstrate the uniqueness of Nexus Solutions technology. But as Attorney Jensen began to present our evidence, one piece at a time, Sterling's expression started to change. He was stunned to see the copies of my notebook, and he turned pale when the lawyer read excerpts from the old emails. When the 2 former colleagues appeared, Sterling's confidence completely crumbled. He couldn't answer the judge's questions adequately and began to stammer. Sterling's lawsuit, far from sinking me, turned out to be a major blow to his reputation and to the credibility of Nexus Solutions. Rumors began to circulate in the tech industry about his petty lawsuit and his cruel treatment of a co-founder. The value of Nexus Solutions shares started to decline on the private stock market. In this silent war, I had won the first round decisively. The defeat in the defamation lawsuit only further enraged Sterling and his mother. They realized that they couldn't defeat me through legal channels, so they started to use darker, dirtier tactics. Their target now was the key people involved in gathering evidence for my case, particularly the witnesses who were well aware of Nexus Solutions' shady dealings. Daniel, with his diligence and his connections, located a key figure, Mr. Davis, Nexus Solutions' former head of accounting. Mr. Davis had worked at the company for 3 years and had left abruptly about 6 months ago, right after the suspicious transactions with Apex Management LLC had begun. Daniel was convinced that he had left to avoid getting involved in illegal activities and that he possessed important information. Convincing Mr. Davis wasn't easy. He was a middle-aged man with a kind personality who just wanted to live a peaceful life with his wife and his 2 young children. When Daniel went to his house, he initially refused to cooperate, saying that he didn't know anything. He was afraid of reprisals and worried that his family would be harmed. "Mr. Daniel, please understand my situation," Mr. Davis said anxiously. "Mrs. Vance is not someone you want to mess with. I have a wife and children. I don't want to be involved in this." Knowing that we couldn't force him, I asked Daniel to approach him gradually, building a relationship of trust and acting as a friend who was concerned about his well-being. Slowly, thanks to Daniel's sincerity and perhaps his own conscience, Mr. Davis started to leak information. He confirmed that all the contracts with Apex Management LLC had been rigged by Mrs. Vance to divert funds. He also knew about many other cases of tax evasion and inflated expenses at the company. But just when we thought we had convinced Mr. Davis to cooperate, Mrs. Vance took action. She didn't threaten him directly, but she used a more subtle approach. Mr. Davis's wife, who worked as a teacher at a private school, suddenly started being harassed by the school administration for ridiculous reasons. His eldest son, a high school student, was surrounded and taunted by some bullies on his way home from school. Fortunately, bystanders intervened in time, and the situation didn't escalate. These incidents weren't serious, but they were a clear warning. Mr. Davis panicked and called Daniel, his voice trembling. "Mr. Daniel, please, leave my family alone. I can't help Miss Hayes anymore. If they want to, I don't know what they might do to my family." When Daniel told me what had happened, my heart sank. The anger that I felt towards those despicable people was nothing compared to the guilt I felt for Mr. Davis's family. I couldn't put an innocent family in danger for my own fight. "Forget it, Daniel," I told him. "Let's not pressure him anymore. His family's safety comes first. We'll find another way." Although it was a disappointment, we had no choice but to temporarily abandon that approach. With the loss of a key witness, our investigation seemed to have reached a dead end, and the difficulties were piling up. I realized that this fight was far tougher than I had initially imagined. My enemies not only had money and power, but they were also willing to use the most cruel tactics to achieve their goals. Seeing that I was feeling discouraged by Mr. Davis's situation, my mother called me to her study one night. She had made chrysanthemum tea, and its delicate aroma helped me to relax. "What's on your mind?" she asked gently, placing a cup in front of me. "I'm just exhausted, Mom. They're too ruthless. I don't want innocent people to suffer because of me." My mother sighed and looked out the window at the garden shrouded in darkness. "Daughter, in business, just like in life, there's no war without casualties. But we have to know where to draw the line. The decision not to pressure Mr. Davis any further is the right one. But that doesn't mean that we give up. To defeat your enemy, you first have to know exactly who they are." My mother looked at me intently. "Tonight, I'm going to tell you a story. The story of your former mother-in-law's past." Sterling's mother. I was surprised. My mother had almost never talked about my in-laws. She had only ever said that they were a normal family, nothing special. In reality, my mother began, "I've known Mrs. Vance for a long time, ever since we were both young and starting out in the business world. Even back then, she was beautiful and intelligent, but her intelligence was paired with ambition and a complete lack of scruples. My mother told me that in the past, Mrs. Vance had partnered with a close friend. Together, they had started a small boutique design house. But when the business started to take off, she hatched a plan to seduce her partner's husband and, at the same time, fabricated false evidence to accuse her of embezzlement. In the end, she seized the entire business, and her friend lost everything and ended up on the street. Sterling's father, my mother continued, was a simple, hard-working technician. Mrs. Vance only married him because he had some talent that could be useful for managing the workshop. He lived his entire life in his wife's shadow, unable to speak his mind, and he died as quietly as he had lived. Sterling grew up in that environment. He was overprotected by his mother, and he was only taught about money and power. That boy is a carbon copy of his mother. He has some talent, but his nature is weak, greedy, and easily manipulated. Listening to my mother's story, I started to understand everything. I understood why my mother-in-law was capable of such cruel and calculated behavior. Greed and betrayal ran through her veins, and the man I once loved, Sterling, was nothing more than a product molded by his mother. And Sierra? I asked. My mother took a sip of tea. That girl, in my opinion, is nothing more than a pawn in Mrs. Vance's game. She knew that Sterling liked women, and she deliberately put her in his path. Young, obedient, and also capable of giving him a grandson to carry on the family name. What more perfect tool could there be? She used her to tie Sterling down and used the pregnancy as a weapon to humiliate you. And once she achieves her goal, who knows what will happen to that girl? My mother's analysis made me realize something. I had been focusing too much on Sterling and Sierra, forgetting that the true mastermind behind everything was my mother-in-law. She was the brains of the entire conspiracy. Realizing this, I knew that I had to change my strategy. My target wasn't just Sterling. It was that cunning woman. In reality, this fight was a confrontation between her and me. A few days after deciding to leave Mr. Davis alone, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, a messenger delivered a small package to my mother's house. There was no sender's name, only an address. Inside the box wasn't a gift. It was a blank, black USB drive. My mother and I looked at each other suspiciously. I carefully connected the USB drive to my laptop. Several audio files, named by date, appeared on the screen. I hesitated for a moment and then clicked on the most recent file. A familiar voice started to play, Sterling's mother's voice. You do as I say. Sign the contract, transfer the money, and I'll take care of everything. That Alexandra doesn't suspect a thing, and Sterling doesn't dare to disobey me. Next, a man's voice, which sounded like a lawyer, was heard. Ma'am, isn't this too risky? If we're discovered, we could face charges of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. Every risk has its reward. Mrs. Vance's voice responded confidently. As soon as we get rid of Alexandra, all of Nexus Solutions will be ours. Do you think this money will be a problem then? Don't worry. We won't forget to reward you. My mother and I listened, holding our breath. The 5 audio files contained conversations between Mrs. Vance and her lawyer, with the representative of Apex Management LLC, and with Sterling. The content revealed their entire conspiracy, from the creation of the shell company and the diversion of funds through false contracts to the plan to seize the company and saddle me with debt. This was the most conclusive, most valuable evidence, worth more than the testimony of dozens of people. It's Mr. Davis, I said softly. It has to be him. He can't show his face, but his conscience wouldn't let him stay silent. My mother nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. He's a good man. We owe him a debt of gratitude. We immediately copied the files in several locations and sent a copy to Attorney Jensen. She said that with this evidence, our victory was almost assured, but the joy was short-lived. That same night, while my mother and I were working late at the Synergitech office, her house alarm suddenly went off, connecting directly to her mobile phone. My mother quickly activated the security cameras. In the blurry nighttime images, 2 dark figures could be seen entering the house through a back patio window. They were ransacking my mother's study, where we had opened the USB drive that afternoon. We immediately called the police. When we arrived at the house with the police, the 2 intruders had already vanished. The study was in disarray, with documents scattered everywhere, but fortunately, they hadn't taken anything of value. It's clear that they weren't after money, my mother said softly. They came for the USB drive. Mrs. Vance must have found out about Mr. Davis. She's desperate to destroy all the evidence. Thank goodness you were careful and made copies and brought the original with you. The failed robbery attempt clearly demonstrated the panic and desperation of the mother-son duo. They were like cornered animals, willing to do anything. I knew. The time for silence was over, and they were now going to resort to more dangerous tactics. I clenched my fists, promising myself that I would be more cautious and, above all, stronger. The fight had entered its most critical stage. The attempted robbery might have failed, but it had certainly sounded the alarm. That mother-son duo wouldn't stop at anything to destroy the evidence, and that fact made me worry even more about Daniel. He had handled the direct investigation, managed a mountain of information, and was, therefore, in the most vulnerable position. I immediately called Daniel and asked him to be extra careful. "Don't worry, ma'am," Daniel said with a determined look on his face. "I know what I'm doing. I'm not afraid of them. What worries me the most right now is that even though the recordings are valuable, they really aren't strong enough to accuse them of tax evasion. We need specific documents, the real accounting books." Daniel then let me know that he was still in contact with some friends who still worked in the accounting department at Nexus Solutions. With some real ingenuity, he had managed to get remote access to the company's internal server during the nights when system surveillance was lower. For several nights, Daniel barely slept, quietly copying and analyzing gigabytes of data, and his perseverance really paid off. He discovered a second accounting system cleverly hidden in a secret partition of the server. This system recorded all of Nexus Solutions' real income and expenses, completely different from the figures they so sweetly presented to the IRS. It revealed systematic tax evasion of tens of millions of dollars over the last 2 years. This was definitive proof, the coup de grace that could finally bring that mother and son duo to justice. But just as Daniel found the most crucial evidence, the enemy also got a whiff of it. One night, as Daniel was returning home from work, 2 motorcycles without license plates blocked his path, forcing him to stop. 4 menacing-looking men got off, and without a word, they pulled him out of the car and gave him a brutal beating. They didn't steal anything. They just completely destroyed his laptop and left him with a clear threat. "This is just a warning. If you keep sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, your family won't be safe." Daniel was taken to the hospital by a passerby with several cracked ribs and a body covered in bruises. When my mother and I rushed to see him and witnessed his sorry state, I felt as if my heart was being stabbed. Daniel's wife cried inconsolably by his side. "Miss Hayes, please, we can't do this anymore. Those people are really bad. We are just employees. How are we going to beat them? I just want my husband to be well." I took his hand, but I had a lump in my throat and couldn't say anything. I felt terribly guilty. Daniel's loyalty had cost him and his family way too high a price. "I'm so sorry," was all I could manage to say. Daniel, despite the intense pain, tried to sit up. "Don't say that, ma'am. I did it of my own free will. I don't regret it." He turned to his wife and said in a hoarse voice, "Honey, I'm sorry I worried you and the kids, but I just can't stand by and watch evil succeed out of fear. I'm doing it not only for Miss Hayes, but for justice." Then he looked at me, his eyes still burning with determination. "Ma'am, they didn't get anything. I saved the most important data elsewhere. Don't give up. We are about to win." The next day, I arranged for Daniel to temporarily take refuge with his wife and children in his in-laws' town. Seeing his small family scattered only further fueled my anger against that wicked mother-son duo. Daniel's sacrifice could not have been in vain. I promised myself that I would make those awful people pay a very high price for what they had done. Daniel's loyalty was absolutely priceless, and I would never betray that trust. About a month after Daniel's incident, once he had recovered and the most important evidence was safely in Attorney Jensen's hands, I decided that the time had finally come to launch a public attack. I needed to create enough pressure from public opinion and the business world so that the mother and son duo couldn't do anything else. The perfect opportunity came when I was invited to participate in a major economic forum that brought together hundreds of top-tier entrepreneurs and investors in the country. I was almost certain that Sterling would also be in attendance. After the initial uproar, Nexus Solutions had been desperately trying to clean up its image, sponsoring several events and boosting its advertising. At this forum, Sterling was invited as one of the main speakers to talk about innovation in the digital age. It was, without a doubt, the perfect opportunity to tear off his mask of hypocrisy. I appeared at the forum with a completely new image. I was no longer the woman wounded by betrayal, but the confident businesswoman, the CEO of Surge Tech. I wore an elegant white suit and sported a modern, short haircut. My presence immediately attracted everyone's attention. They whispered curiously about the awkward relationship between Sterling and me. Sterling was noticeably surprised to see me, but he quickly regained a false confidence. He even approached me, extending his hand as if offering a social greeting. "Long time no see, Alexandra. I didn't know you were interested in these forums." "The business world is a small place, President Vance," I replied with an equally social smile, but without accepting his hand. "I wish you a very successful presentation." Sterling's presentation went off without a hitch. He spoke eloquently about Nexus Solutions' achievements and its ambitious future plans, trying hard to paint an idyllic picture of the company. He received considerable applause, but the real show hadn't even begun yet. During the question and answer session, after several routine questions from journalists, I calmly raised my hand to ask for the floor. All eyes in the room instantly turned toward me. The moderator hesitated for just a moment, but then gave me the floor. I walked to the center of the aisle, took the microphone, and stared intently at the stage where Sterling stood with a forced smile. "Good morning, President Vance." I began with a clear and crisp voice. "I am Alexandra Hayes, CEO of Synergite Tech. First of all, congratulations on your impressive presentation. My question is about transparency in business management, a topic I am sure interests all the investors present here." I paused for a moment so that everyone's attention could reach its peak. According to the financial reports recently published by Nexus Solutions, the company's profit growth rate is very positive. However, consulting and marketing expenses have skyrocketed, representing an unusually high proportion of total revenue. In my experience, this is somewhat anomalous. Could you explain more clearly to the investors and partners here the cost structure and the actual efficiency of these investments? My question wasn't a direct accusation, but it struck directly at Nexus Solutions' Achilles heel. It sowed great doubt about the veracity of the figures they were publishing. The entire room understood the hidden meaning behind my question. On stage, Sterling turned visibly pale. He clearly wasn't prepared for this situation. He tried to stammer out some generic answers about long-term investment strategies and brand building, but he just couldn't offer a convincing explanation. His nervousness was, in itself, the most eloquent answer. I didn't need to say anything more. I simply thanked him and calmly returned to my seat, but the impact of my question was truly enormous. Murmurs erupted throughout the room. Investors looked at each other suspiciously. Journalists began writing frantically, all focused on a single question. I had completely demolished the image that Sterling and his mother had painstakingly built up. Nexus Solutions' credibility suffered an irreparable fissure in the eyes of the entire business world. The revelation at the Economic Forum was, without a doubt, a severe blow to Nexus Solutions. Investors began to question everything. The press didn't stop publishing speculative articles, and the company's value plummeted. Amidst all of this chaos, Sterling's mother, Mrs. Vance, knew she couldn't stand idly by. She understood that confronting me directly would be hugely disadvantageous. Now that all the evidence and public opinion were squarely on my side, she decided to play her last card, a malicious psychological attack aimed directly at the person she considered my weak point. My mother, CEO Isabella Hayes. Mrs. Vance personally called my mother and, with a surprisingly amiable voice, proposed a private meeting in an exclusive cafe to talk like adults. My mother, after consulting with me and attorney Jensen, accepted the proposal. She knew it was a trap, but it was also an opportunity for that shrewd old fox to betray herself. The exclusive cafe was nestled down a quiet alley, a serene space filled with the gentle murmur of water and the soft aroma of incense. My mother arrived, dressed in an elegant, dark purple velvet suit jacket that exuded depth and serenity. Mrs. Vance was already waiting for her, meticulously made up, but utterly unable to hide her fatigue and rage. "Isabella, you came," Mrs. Vance said with a forced smile. "It's been a long time since we sat down alone like this." My mother also smiled gently and sat across from her. "Hello, Eleanor. I certainly hope it's important that you called me yourself." Mrs. Vance began to speak evasively while serving the tea. "It's about the children. Young people in their impetuousness sometimes do things they shouldn't. It seems to me that Alexandra is going a little too far lately. As much as they were husband and wife, you just can't push a person into a dead end like this. The Blow Nexus Solutions suffered because of the forum was very significant. My mother listened in complete silence, imperturbable, as she raised her teacup to her lips. Getting no reaction, Mrs. Vance began to grow impatient. She put down the cup with a dry thud, and her voice sharpened considerably. Isabella, let's be honest. Control your daughter. We will compensate her handsomely for any money she wants. If we keep escalating this, it won't be good for anyone. When the net breaks, the fish die. Do you understand what I mean? No, I don't understand, my mother replied, still in a calm voice. My daughter is simply trying to recover what is fair. What is wrong with that? Mrs. Vance laughed, her gaze sharp as a knife. Justice? Where is absolute justice in this world? You and I are businesswomen. You won't tell me you don't know that everyone has something to hide. Things they'd prefer others not to know. Are you sure your Phoenix Capital Group is 100% clean? She was beginning to show her true colors. I still remember that real estate project in the Florida Keys 10 years ago. You were very fast then, too. Thanks to a few pieces of privileged information, you acquired some golden land. If all that came out in the press now, what would your investors think? It was a blatant threat. She was using past business dealings, the complex networks of contacts, to pressure my mother and make her back down. She really thought my mother, just like her, would sacrifice her own daughter for her own interests. But Mrs. Vance had greatly miscalculated. Upon hearing the threat, my mother didn't even flinch. She simply slowly took her cell phone out of her purse, pressed the stop recording button, and placed it deliberately on the table. The screen was still lit, clearly showing that the recording had been in progress. Thank you, Eleanor, my mother said in a serene but forceful voice. Our entire conversation, especially that threat you just made, has been meticulously recorded. I believe this audio file, along with the other evidence, will help the authorities understand the case much more comprehensively. Mrs. Vance's face went from red to white. She stammered, You dare? What wouldn't I dare? My mother interrupted her. The businesses you mentioned were managed entirely legally. I have absolutely nothing to hide. If you want to investigate, go right ahead. But your actions today, threatening and intimidating another person, have been clearly recorded. I believe the one who should be worried right now is you. With that, my mother stood up and straightened her suit. The tea was delicious. Thank you for the invitation. I must leave now. My mother left elegantly, leaving a petrified and distraught Mrs. Vance sitting alone in the cafe. She trembled from head to toe, wearing an expression of complete disbelief. Her last psychological attack had not only failed miserably, but had also become living evidence that incriminated her. The old fox had fallen directly into her own trap. Mrs. Vance returned home in a state of extreme panic. The encounter with my mother had completely demolished her last shred of confidence and composure. She smashed a tea set against the floor, screaming hysterically throughout the house. Sterling, frightened by his mother's state, rushed in to ask her, Mom, what's wrong? It's over. Mrs. Vance cried out, her hair a complete mess. Everything is over. That woman recorded everything. She set a trap for me. We are finished, son. She then told Sterling the whole story. Listening to her, Sterling also froze, his face completely devoid of blood. He was fully aware of their desperate situation. Mr. Davis's audio files, the double accounting system that Daniel had found, and now his own mother's recording threatening CEO Hayes. All of this evidence, taken together, was more than enough to send both of them straight to prison. What do we do, Mom? What if I go see Alexandra and beg for her forgiveness? Sterling said in a trembling voice. His innate weakness was yet again surfacing. Beg for forgiveness? His mother snapped. Do you really think that will do any good now? Do you think Alexandra and her mother will just let us go that easily? You fool, we only have one way out. What? Run? Mrs. Vance said, grinding her teeth. We have to leave here before the police come. Sell all the shares, take out all the money, and leave the country. With money, you can live anywhere. In their desperation, a hasty plan to divert assets was quickly drawn up. Mrs. Vance contacted several intermediaries through her old business contacts and agreed to quickly sell all her Nexus Solutions shares at a price far lower than the market price. The transaction had to be fast and strictly in cash. At the very same time, Sterling was entrusted with withdrawing money from both the company and their personal bank accounts, gradually transferring it to offshore accounts through unofficial channels. They moved completely in secret, constantly terrified. Sterling spent the entire day locked in his room, his face haggard, talking on the phone in hushed whispers. Sierra, her belly now very swollen with pregnancy, noticed the change in Sterling and asked him what was happening, but she only received irritation and evasiveness. Her feminine intuition told her that something really bad was happening. She secretly looked at Sterling's phone and was horrified to see a reservation confirmation message for one-way flight tickets to Europe. The tickets were only for 2 people, Sterling and his mother. Sierra collapsed, completely heartbroken. She understood that she and the child she carried were nothing more than pawns who were now about to be completely abandoned. Meanwhile, on our side, all the movements of that mother-son duo were completely under control. Daniel, from his refuge, continued to closely monitor Nexus Solutions transactions through trusted friends. Upon detecting the anomalous sale of a large quantity of company shares and the withdrawal of vast sums of money from the accounts, Daniel immediately informed me. "Ma'am, I think they are trying to flee." Daniel's voice on the other end of the phone was undeniably urgent. Hearing the news, I didn't hesitate for a single second. I immediately called Attorney Jensen. "Attorney, I think the time has finally come." "Understood," the lawyer replied firmly. "Alexandra, stay calm. I will go immediately to the authorities with all the documents and evidence we have. The net of justice is wide, and although it often seems slow, it never fails. They won't be able to go anywhere." Night fell over the city. In the luxurious mansion, that mother-son duo hurriedly packed bundles of cash and important documents into suitcases to catch an early morning flight. They had absolutely no idea that outside their house, an invisible net of the law had already been cast, slowly closing in, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. That night, the city was soaked by persistent rain. The rhythmic tapping of the drops on the window sounded almost like a sad melody announcing the bitter end. Sterling's mansion, despite it being midnight, was fully illuminated. The air inside was as tense as a tightly drawn bowstring. Mrs. Vance kept moving around, restless, constantly urging Sterling, "Hurry up, son. The car to the airport will be here any minute. Is everything ready?" "Yes, mother," Sterling replied in a tired voice. He had just finished a call with an intermediary who confirmed that the last stock sale transaction had been successfully completed, and the cash would be delivered to him at a secret location. Everything seemed to be going according to their desperate plan. They didn't know that Attorney Jensen had spent the entire afternoon at the district attorney's office. She had presented the entire case clearly and logically, from the evidence of my intellectual property theft to the false contracts, the double accounting, the call recordings, and the audio of Mrs. Vance threatening my mother. This massive, irrefutable set of evidence completely surprised the investigators. Given the extreme seriousness of the case and the very real risk of the suspects fleeing the country, an arrest warrant and an asset freeze order were urgently approved. Just as Sterling and his mother, dragging suitcases full of cash and documents, were leaving the front door to get into the waiting car, 2 police cars silently pulled up, completely blocking the exit. Doors flew open and several uniformed officers got out. At the front was an inspector with a serious face. "We are from the FBI's Economic Crimes Unit," the inspector said, showing the arrest warrant to the mother-son duo. "Sterling Vance and Eleanor Vance, you must accompany us to the precinct to clarify some matters related to the management of Nexus Solutions." Mrs. Vance froze completely. The suitcase she was holding fell to the ground, and bundles of cash spilled out, scattering onto the rain-soaked pavement. Her face turned as white as paper, and her eyes widened in utter terror. Her perfect plan had crumbled right at the very gates of paradise. Sterling trembled from head to toe, and his legs gave way, forcing him to lean against the wall to keep from completely falling down. "There must be some mistake," Mrs. Vance stammered. "We are honest business people. We haven't done anything wrong." The inspector said no more and simply signaled to his subordinates. The mother-son duo was quickly led to the police cars, immersed in utter confusion and complete helplessness. At the same time, another team of officers entered the house to execute a search and seizure order. The entire mansion, as well as all bank accounts, shares, and all assets in the names of Sterling and Mrs. Vance, were immediately frozen. The net of the law had closed without leaving a single loophole. From the second-floor window, Sierra saw everything, hugging her belly and crying inconsolably. There was absolutely no place for her or her unborn son in Sterling and his mother's elaborate escape plan. She had been discarded like a useless object. Now, seeing the man she once loved and the woman she feared being taken away by the police, Sierra only felt infinite emptiness and complete despair. When Attorney Jensen gave me the news, I was sitting in the living room with my mother. I felt neither joy nor triumph. In my heart, only a strange calm reigned. A stormy chapter of my life had finally ended. All the lingering resentment and hatred seemed to have been washed away by the torrential rain of that night. The following months were filled with legal proceedings. The Nexus Solutions case, due to its magnitude and complexity, caused a great stir in the business world. With the irrefutable evidence we had provided, the prosecution quickly unraveled the entire conspiracy. The trial was public and, predictably, attracted a great deal of media attention. I purposefully did not attend. I truly didn't want to see the faces that had caused me so much harm ever again. I learned everything through Attorney Jensen's calls and from the constant news coverage. In court, faced with the overwhelming and evident proofs, Sterling completely collapsed. He confessed to all his crimes, admitting to helping his mother divert funds, creating false debts, and planning the theft of my assets after the divorce. Crying uncontrollably, he blamed everything on his mother's instigation and relentless pressure, pleading for clemency from the court. The image of the confident and arrogant president had completely disappeared. Only a weak and utterly miserable prisoner remained. In stark contrast, Mrs. Vance stood firm until the very end. She vehemently denied all of the charges, claiming she was the victim of a vast conspiracy, that the recordings had been manipulated, and that the accounting books had been deliberately falsified. She continued to play the role of the innocent victim until the prosecution presented the recording of her call threatening my mother. Hearing her own voice, arrogant and menacing, resonating throughout the solemn courtroom, she finally broke down and silently bowed her head in utter defeat. The final verdict was harsh, but ultimately fair. For the crimes of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion, Eleanor Vance, as the principal perpetrator, was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Sterling, considering his confession and apparent repentance, was sentenced as an accomplice to 15 years. The other parties involved also received their corresponding punishments. Nexus Solutions, my spiritual child that I had once nurtured with all my heart, now completely stained by debt and corruption, was finally declared bankrupt. Justice had finally been served, but in my heart, there was no real joy of victory, only a melancholic sadness for a beautiful first love that had ended so tragically, and for the wasted years of my youth that had been lost in deception. A week after the trial ended, I decided to do something I had been thinking about for quite a while. I drove to the quiet rural town where Daniel's family was temporarily staying. I truly wanted to express my sincere gratitude to my loyal assistant, who had sacrificed so much for me. Daniel's small house was surrounded by lush green fields. The air was pure and peaceful, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the city. Daniel, his wife, and children came out to meet me at the entrance to the town with a warm and heartfelt welcome. Their smiles were simple and truly affectionate. Daniel's injuries had completely healed, and he looked much healthier and happier than I had seen him in a very long time. I brought some gifts and a significant financial gratuity, but the couple flatly refused to accept them. "Ma'am, please don't do this," Daniel said earnestly. "What I did was because I believed in justice and in you. Your victory is the greatest gift for me. Now please, let me return to work at Synergitech. I missed the work very much. We shared a simple but comforting meal together. Listening to the warm laughter of the couple and the carefree chatter of the children, I felt a deep and profound sense of peace. I realized that, after all the storms, what is truly important is not money or success, but simple human affection, unwavering loyalty, and selfless kindness. This trip cleansed the last vestiges of bitterness from my heart and prepared me to confidently face a brand new chapter in my life. A year has now passed, a full year since that stormy night when Sterling and his mother disappeared amid the flashing lights and blaring sirens of the police cars. And I, sitting quietly by the window in my mother's house, sighed deeply, as if a tremendous weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. Time has certainly healed many things, but it hasn't completely erased the scars. And from those scars, I have learned how to be reborn. My life did not stop at the deep pain or end with the cruel betrayal. I chose another path. With my own hands and unwavering vision, I built my own business. Synergitech, the small company we started in a modest office with Daniel and just a few young engineers, is now a shining name in the technology sector. At first, we spent countless nights programming, fueled by nothing more than instant noodles. When we got our first significant contract, we hugged each other and shouted with unrestrained joy. We made countless presentations to potential investors to secure the necessary funding and were sometimes deeply discouraged by cold. Despite the rejections, we persevered. The moment of triumph arrived at 1:11:42 a.m. during the Entrepreneur of the Year Gala. Standing tall in my white suit under the dazzling lights of the grand stage, I accepted a crystal trophy from a government official. A deafening ovation erupted, but this time, it felt different. I was no longer living in Sterling's shadow, nor was I simply standing beside someone to be called the president's wife. I was Alexandra Hayes, a successful entrepreneur in my own right, a woman who had risen above it all. The press scrambled to publish articles hailing me as the icon of the American technology sector's renaissance. But what touched me most wasn't those headlines. It was Daniel's gaze from the audience, shining with pride and the warm smile of an old friend who had silently supported me from a distance. Another pivotal moment came when the court ordered the liquidation of Nexus Solutions' assets to settle its debts. At the public auction, I sat in the front row. My former competitor was now nothing more than a name associated with ruins. When the original patent for the management system that I had conceived came up for auction, I didn't hesitate to raise my paddle. The room filled with whispers. Finally, for a reasonable price, I bought it all back. The moment the ownership title was in my hands, I closed my eyes in silence. The circle was complete. Nexus Solutions, the place where I had been betrayed and humiliated, was officially a thing of the past, and the product of my mind had returned to its creator. I felt no sense of triumph or arrogance, only a profound sense of peace. An old door had closed, and a new one had swung wide open. One summer afternoon, while visiting a friend in a hospital's maternity ward, I unexpectedly ran into Sierra. She was sitting in the hallway, cradling a chubby baby. She was no longer wearing designer clothes. She wore a loose-fitting shirt and looked plain. Her face was tired, but the look she gave her son was incredibly tender. Sierra looked up and froze when she saw me. There was no longer any arrogance or defiance in her eyes, just a wounded and lonely young mother. "Alexandra," Sierra said in a trembling whisper. I looked at the child in her arms. He was sleeping peacefully, moving his lips as if he were dreaming. In that instant, all the hatred within me disappeared. I realized that this child wasn't to blame for anything. He didn't choose his parents, nor did he know anything about the dirty dealings of the past. "Are you okay?" I asked. Sierra lowered her head, and tears began to fall. "I'm sorry, Alexandra. It's too late for everything. I just want to raise this child well. Can you ever forgive me?" I sighed. Forgiveness wasn't for her, but for me. Continuing to hold on to hatred would only hurt myself. "The past is the past, Sierra. Take good care of your son. He needs a mother who knows how to live right." Sierra hugged her son and burst into tears. I nodded slightly in farewell and continued on my way. I felt as light as a feather. Another afternoon, Andrew and I were strolling along the New England coast. The reddish sun was slowly setting on the horizon, and the waves gently lapped at the shore. I took off my shoes and felt the cool water on my bare feet. Andrew walked beside me in silence, but his presence alone brought me peace. "Alexandra," Andrew said softly, "you have lived too long for others. Now live for yourself. And if one day you want someone to be there with you, I would like it to be me." I turned toward Andrew. His eyes were kind and steady. Instead of answering, I smiled. I wasn't ready to start a new romance just yet, but I knew I had a friend, a life companion, a calm shoulder to lean on. We walked together along the long sandy beach, leaving 2 sets of footprints behind us. Before me stretched the vast sea and a sky painted red by the sunset, announcing a new day in my life. I took a deep breath. An intense feeling of faith blossomed in my chest. Because even if a woman loses everything, if she holds on to her dignity, her wisdom, and her courage, she can always be reborn and find happiness.